Tobias, a very good morning to you. We'll talk to you about extremism in just a tick, but from a political point of view, in terms of being a serving MP, we'd love your take on this. We've been talking about it all morning. We're not, you might have an opinion, you might not. I think that what Frank Hester said was racist. He's apologised. But then overnight, there's this story that Diane Abbott, who's accused both Labour and yourselves of being racist, certain people want to reinstate her for something she said she's about. But she came to the chamber yesterday. Whatever you think of the woman's politics, and I don't like her, they are debating something that happened to her, and she tried to stand up 40 times. I would ask this question to you, Tobias. Does this not show that the Speaker of the House of Commons is losing the plot? Last week he was talking about MP safety. This woman, who I don't particularly like, somebody said, I want to shoot her. Why didn't he let her speak?
Have we lost Tobias? Tobias, are you there?
I can't. I can only see Diane Abbott. Where's Tobias? Is he there?
I'm here.
Sorry,
there
mate.
you are.
I'm
we
here.
can hear you now, Tobias. Your response to what Jeremy asked there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bigger issue here to do with how do we get good people to actually come and participate in British politics. And if Parliament doesn't operate correctly, people will be put off by that. So I absolutely agree. I'm sorry that Diane Abbott wasn't given the opportunity to speak, because that's what people want to hear. So I think the Speaker will probably reflect on that, and she'll get another opportunity later. It's been a difficult period in British politics for the last 5 years or so, but particularly in the last 3 or 4 months. It's important that we don't lose the art of debate and the art of disagreeing well, rather than building on hatred, building on venom, building on anger, which is a lot about what this whole extremism discussion has been about. So I absolutely agree with you.
Do you think there would have been a reason that Lindsay Hoyle didn't go to Diane Abbott? What could you predict might be his reasoning for not actually taking her questions yesterday?
You know, I really don't know. You'll have to invite him onto your programme and ask him that yourself. But I absolutely agree with you. I think for the benefit of people to be able to say their side of the argument, perhaps to apologise as well, to clarify what their views are. That's important. That's what Parliament is about. It comes from that French word to speak. And she wasn't able to have that opportunity yesterday. So it's sad in that way. I do want to see us raise the bar. We need to retain that bar high, not only for today's politics, but as I say, if we want to then encourage the next generation of parliamentarians to want to come and represent their country. And
I think that's the point of us, and we'll talk about extremism literally in seconds. But my big fear, whatever your political persuasion, and I've said it for months, is the British public are pretty hacked off with politicians and the political games, the shenanigans we see, the point scoring, the this, the that. And whether it's Lindsay Hoyle or it's people slinging mud, one of the most important times in our history, you look at what's happening in the world, you look at what's happening with the cost of living crisis. I would like the British people to be engaged, because actually not only is it their right, I feel it's their duty, and they then have a say in who they elect. But people, Tobias, are looking at where you work, and you know this, you're an honest guy, and they're going, this is becoming a joke, and we're finding that people are finding it very difficult to look at that with any degree of just anything. They're very cynical, mate. There's no passion anymore, and that, if I was a politician, would be my biggest concern.
Yeah, I mean, you look back in history, why is Britain great? It's because of British leadership. It's because of the leadership that has been provided by government and by Parliament. People in history, whether they be academics, military personnel, economists, industrialists, have stopped what they're doing and entered Parliament and become the giants, the greats in our past. They're the shoulders that we stand on. But if we want the great politicians of the future, they need to be inspired to want to stand today. And if they see how we conduct ourselves, but also how we're treated as well. I mean, there's a whole cacophony of issues here, but it weakens then Parliament. And if Parliament is weakened, don't forget that's the gene pool of which our executive, our government is then selected from. So it's in Britain's interest to make sure that we have good, solid debate inside Parliament, so we do attract the next generation. Otherwise, Britain is all the poorer for that.
Completely agree.
Speaking of solid debate, Tobias, there has been an awful lot of debate over the government's new definition of extremism. Does it go far enough, or has it gone too far? Can we just get your response to that?
Yeah, you've discussed it on the program. I've discussed it with you as well. There's been a significant increase in anti-Muslim, anti-Semitism, hatred on our street line. There's been tensions within communities, between communities, and we've even seen, going back to Parliament, the business of the House affected over that Gaza ceasefire, as well as MPs being targeted, including myself. And this all led to the Prime Minister making an important intervention, you might recall, outside of Downing Street at the beginning of March, to say this behavior is not acceptable. This is not who we are. We are a tolerant, inclusive, and open society. And the boundaries of acceptable behavior have been continually tested. So that's led to, I think, thrown up major societal challenges that, despite simply, following the 7th of October Hamas attacks. But we need to have this evolving conversation, of which the government has now taken a lead on this. Let's listen to the community views, but we do need to understand what extremism is doing in our society, but do so in a way that doesn't isolate or indeed offend anybody whatsoever. But we do need to stand up to those who don't share our values and standards.
Listen, I agree. We've got, into much discussion today, Tobias, about whether definition goes far enough. One of the things that I keep saying, I'd love your opinion on this, is free speech is the bedrock of what our society is, and I would never argue against that. And there are many people on many marches, right, who genuinely have concerns. But anybody who doesn't admit that the next sentence is right is, I think, wrong. I believe that many of these causes, be it Just Stop Oil, be it the Palestinian marches, are being hijacked by fanatics and extremists. And I would love to know from you whether you think there's enough on the statute book that the law, the police in this country aren't utilising enough, or we need extra laws, because I go back to the fact that politicians are only in their jobs because of British people, and it might be a conversation several don't want, but it is fair to say that people are very concerned about that. So is there enough on the statute book? Do the police need to kick up the backside, or do we need new laws?
I think it's a combination of those. Whoever thought they would have to legislate to protect war graves and historical monuments in that sense, because it's never come up before. We've never had people test the limits of acceptable public behavior by stamping all over these things. We've had to legislate because of that. So it's a combination of both, of the police being, confirming what their rules can be, like shining emblems and logos onto the side of Westminster Tower is unacceptable. And I think the police could have intervened then. But as I say, it's a changing society that we're going through now. This is why the government has stepped forward. What I hope, and we'll see this today because there'll be a statement in Parliament, is that then community leaders then can react to this, so we have a more cross-party consensus as to how to move forward. This must be something that all of Britain buys into, because this is what Britain is about.
And Tobias, do you think that the crux of the issue, we speak a lot about the marches, and of course the majority of people on those marches are expressing their right to free speech, but also to call for a ceasefire amongst what they see as a humanitarian crisis, and these constant images on social media of children starving, hospitals being bombed, etc. The crux of this is essentially hate speech. This is the law that the police can use in order to arrest people. But what isn't clear is what one side deems to be a call for Palestinian freedom. We spoke about this earlier on the show. Whereas the other side deem it to be extermination of Israelis and therefore the Jewish people. So does there need to be more leadership from government to define the difference between those two things and try and get some understanding where people can actually meet in the middle, rather than saying you're an extremist and you're an extremist?
And that's so important to recognize and make that distinction. The people that were outside of my house were just violent protesters. I don't think they meant any physical harm whatsoever, and they need to be dealt with in the normal forms of the law, of antisocial behavior and so forth. The people that killed my brother in Bali in 2002, they were jihadists, they were extremists, and they need to be dealt with counter-terrorism laws and so forth. Very different indeed. And the two cannot be conflated. When you see these marches take place, they are absolutely normally peaceful marches with the absolute majority wanting to just express their message. Unfortunately, there are individuals that then choose to utilize that, to exploit those marches, to then push their message. And that's what the government is concerned about, is to make sure that we can actually identify and weed those extremists out.
I think you've nailed that absolutely. And I think, you know, I don't know how you do it. I know there's confusion this morning about definition, which is why I said to you, do we need to be stronger? But anybody who will not accept that people are hijacking what are the rights of people to protest and putting, I mean, you just explained it. People are outside your house. They're just out to cause trouble. These people should be arrested. Oh, but we can't do that because we haven't got enough prisons. Final question for you. You've always been great with us, and I really appreciate it. Do you think Rishi Sunak should give back the 10 million quid to that donor?
Well, I passed on my own views on him. It was racist and it was unacceptable. And along with Lee Anderson comments as well, it's all made the whole entire debate all the more confusing as well. I'm pleased that it was gripped. Perhaps it should have been gripped a little bit faster, but it is, you know, now for the party to decide as to where to go forward. But ultimately, I'm pleased that we've got this counter extremism strategy starting to develop. It's been overdue for that consideration. This new extremism definition will help. Michael Gove will give a big statement today in Parliament. And that, I think there are lots of questions to be asked. He's recognised that. And I hope we'll provide clarity of that, but also unity, because I go back to the point, we've got to ask ourselves, who are we? What makes Britain? What brings us together? What unites us? And let's challenge what divides us.